Welcome in, Big Blue Nation, to another episode of the Cats Talk podcast. I am your host, Cameron Johnston. He is your host, Tyler Britton. Tyler, we were in attendance for Saturday's catastrophe. Kroger Field was packed to the gills. It was blacked out. Some people were blacked out in a different manner. Us, we were just wearing our black. We had to buy some new UK gear just to fit in. Didn't have too much black UK attire. Guess what? We got in there. We were loud. We were standing for just about the entire game. At some points in this game, it felt like we were giving more effort than the Cats were. They kept shooting themselves in their foot, losing 20-13 against the Vanderbilt Commodores. What are you thinking?
Yeah, Cam, first and foremost, I just want to give a shout out to Cats Talk Podcast for funding the hat and shirt here, aka Cam's wallet. Thank you so much for that. Look, it was my first time out at Kroger Field. It was a really exciting time pregame to go out there and check out the environment there. Tell you what, Cam, I felt like the fans were there. It felt like the student body was there. We were walking up and down the streets. The parties were going. The tailgates were going. It seemed like the energy was there, man. It seemed like, fans were expecting to have a great game. It was going to be a Saturday night football game, Saturday night fights. The stadium was jam-packed. I mean, we were shoulder to shoulder with people that we had no idea. You were about to scrap with someone who was talking nonsense behind you. But at the end of the day, we were all going for the Cats here. And, it just felt like a big letdown there at the end. I'm not going to lie, Cam. It just felt like every single time we had something going, something turned off, whether it was a turnover early, whether it was a botched snap kick, whether it was a third and long on defense, and all we had to do is stop them, and then they pick up the first down, or we get yet another flag. It just seemed like there was always something going on here with the team, and it just didn't feel like Kentucky came out to play this game. It didn't feel like the Kentucky football team that came out to play against Ole Miss a couple weeks prior there. I don't know what it is about Mark Stoops and his team coming out the week after here, but he's not doing a good job coming off a bye week here. You'd think that he'd play it better. We had a 75% chance of winning this game coming into the week. I get Vandy has been playing a little bit of out of their mind lately. It's totally respectable. I'm giving credit to Vandy here. They played a hell of a game. But come on, man. We had every opportunity to win that game. Even late in the game, after all the mistakes we made, we still had a chance, and we just couldn't pull it through. It was a very frustrating game to watch, Cam.
Frustrating doesn't even begin to describe it on my point. It was such a vibrant atmosphere when we got to Lexington on Friday. There were just people walking around. Everybody was in their Kentucky gear. I don't know if we saw a single person not wearing Cats gear. Big Blue Madness got the weekend started. That place was packed. That place was electric. The downtown atmosphere, everybody was out. Everybody was talking about tailgating for the game, going to Keeneland prior. It was such a great weekend in Lexington until it wasn't. Until the Cats came out, laid that egg. I mean, we'll get into it. Break it down more drive by drive. But, I mean, it really started from the very first possession. We're moving the ball. We get onto Vandy's side. And Dane Key just gets a very uncharacteristic personal foul. It's just, there were so many out-of-character things that happened in this game, starting with the very first drive. It's still kind of weird to look back at. Mark Stoops in his post-game presser, he looked about as dumbfounded as we did when we were walking out of the stadium. People were asking us, we were by some Vandy fans at the end of the game because we had to get our post-game picture for the podcast. And we were just, everybody was stunned. I think Vandy sat there and I don't think they deserved to win that game. I really don't. We outgained them on the ground. We outgained them through the air. We had one more turnover. But I don't think anybody watches that tape or watches that game and looks at it and says, Vandy's the better team. They have the more talented team. They were definitely more disciplined, and that's part of what won them the game the prior week against Alabama. It's so many compounding mistakes that it seemed like we had kind of started to get away with. Coming into this game, we were the least penalized team in the SEC. And then to have 12 penalties for 105 yards. And in college football, that doesn't take in, the amount of yards gained on the play that it took away either, like it does in the NFL. For that 105, it could genuinely be 185, 190 yards if you were looking at like an NFL way they break down stats. It's just constantly with this program right now, we're coming off the biggest win, one of the biggest wins in program history, going to Ole Miss, beating the number 5 team in the nation. You have 2 weeks to prepare for a Vandy team that, yes, Vandy is playing well. This is not the same Vandy from 3 years ago. They had just beat number 1 Alabama. But this is still Vanderbilt. There weren't that many fans there. You wouldn't be able to tell. I'm not sure whose decision it was to have the blackout when Vanderbilt's colors are black. I need to talk to that person because that just doesn't seem like the smartest idea in my opinion. So you couldn't tell if we were all Vandy fans or if there was just a little small section. Frustrating to say the least. I'm starting to get so frustrated just sitting here now. I'm starting to tailspin out of topic. So Tyler, rein it back in. Let's start talking about these drives individually.
Sure, Cam. Let's go ahead and talk about these drives. Yeah, we started off with that first drive there, as you said. We were making it our way downtown until Dane Keys got that personal foul early on in the game. And look, I don't mind a little chippiness going on, but you gotta watch yourself. You gotta keep your cool here, especially as one of the leaders on the team here. That ultimately gave the ball back to Vandy. They went down and scored. We were able to retaliate with another score ourselves. I felt like we were going to get our self-esteem back. We got the interception here, but then we gave the ball right back. It was one of those. It really truly felt like one of those games where we were going tit for tat there. Obviously, Vanderbilt was able to go down and score their touchdown, and then they were able to get the ball back again, kick another field goal. We went for it the next drive. We went for it and ended up not getting it late on downs there. Vanderbilt ended up kicking another field goal. We were finally able to get a touchdown, but we weren't able to kick the extra point. It was just one of those games. It was just one of those games where it seemed like we couldn't finish most of our drives, and if we did, we were doing so good all year on field goals. What the hell happened? What the hell happened? All of a sudden, we can't hold a snap. We can't snap the ball. We can't kick a ball. I'm kind of confused. And then, good God, have we ever ran a fire drill in practice? Sweet saints. Next thing you know, I'm looking down for a second. I thought it was a gimme kick. I looked down on the field. I looked down on my lap really quick to check my phone. I forget what I was doing. Maybe I was grabbing my drink. I don't know. I looked back up. Next thing you know, I see the freaking placeholder 15 yards downfield, and I'm like, what is he doing?
I was screaming fire. I think they heard me on the field because I think
so too.
I know Wilson Berry wasn't yelling it. I saw the botched snap. Don't get me wrong. The snap was not that bad. He could have gotten that snap down. It wasn't a great snap by any means. He could have got that down. We were in a perfect spot to watch that. But he starts to fumble it on the way down, and he just starts taking off. I'm a specialist, so I know what's going on. That's my time to shine. When you botch a snap or it's a bad snap, that's Wilson's time to shine. So I'm out there, I'm yelling fire. I'm screaming. I'm jumping up and down. Fire, fire, fire. And the only player I think that we had that tried to run a route, I think the very left side.
That's why I was waiting. That's why he was 15 yards back, and I was looking. He just started releasing. By the time I looked, I was like, and then he released, and I was like, "There's no shot. There's no shot. This guy has practices. Did they even try?
Yeah. So I mean, we finished with 2 turnovers, but one of them was your backup punter throwing an interception on a fire drill. So I mean, even in the turnover battle, we ended up losing, but it was really 1-1. But that very first turnover, to get back to that. It's our third drive of the game. We had just come back from scoring the touchdown. We get onto their side of the field, and then Dane Key with another screw-up. Fumbles the ball. And even that possession, we had come back. We had put ourselves in a 2nd and 20. We got the first down, and then we compounded even more mistakes. Dane fumbles again. And I don't want to pile on Dane. He's had a great season. He has easily been our first, if not our second best offensive weapon behind Demi. So I hate to pile on him. But he single-handedly messed up this entire first half for the Cats. The personal foul in the very first drive takes us out of field goal range. We have to punt. They immediately score. The very next drive, he fumbles. I get he's the best player on the team right now, but sometimes there's got to be actions taken to people. I mean, Bill Belichick, there'll be times you fumbled, you might not play for 2 to 3 games. That's usually how good teams and good franchises run stuff like that. We got to have more accountability. I know it's hard in the new NIL era because it's so easy for players to transfer and stuff like that. So you kind of have to tiptoe your way around talking to some of these guys. But Mark has to have accountability in that locker room. Supposedly he had a team meeting on Monday where he was holding guys accountable, talking about how certain things aren't going to be allowed going forward. It sucks to see when it's coming from one of your leaders who does everything on and off the field perfectly, and it sucks that he was the guy that this happened to fall on this week.
Yeah, speaking of Mark Stoops here, can we just talk about him for a second here? I mean, we were discussing it a little bit before we went on air here. You know, he's the 9th highest paid coach in all of college football. The 9th, not 29th, not 39th. The 9th. Why don't we go down that list and break that down really quick, Cam? Let me know if you need the list read to you.
I got it. First is Kirby Smart. I mean, I think we all know how that's working out at Georgia. Perennial championship contender if they're not winning it anyways. Dabo Swinney at Clemson. He's won national titles there. Steve Sarkisian over at Texas. They went to the playoff last year, got put out. They're the number 1 team in the nation now. Lincoln Riley out at USC had the Heisman winner and Caleb Williams, the number 1 pick. They did underperform a little bit, but at least he had, when his time at Oklahoma, he had them always in the fight. Mike Norvell at Florida State. They were just shy. They get left out of the playoffs last year. They're struggling this year, and they're talking about firing him. They started 0-3. The fans wanted him gone. 7th on that list is Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. Former Washington coach. He took them to the playoffs last year, and Alabama is still looking good this year. And then 8th on that list, the only person left before Mark Stoops is Brian Kelly down at LSU. I think we all know what he did at Notre Dame, at Cincinnati, and now here at LSU. He's got them as a perennial, maybe, I don't know if I'd say playoff contender yet. Maybe now with the expanded playoffs, they'll be a perennial guy. They'll be perennial in that search there. And then you get to Mark Stoops, and I mean, he's been great for this program in general, taking us from where we came from. But to mention him with those names, it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't seem like we're getting our values worth. And Mark Stoops famously has said, you know, if you want to compete with Georgia, if you want to compete with Alabama, he told the fans to pony up and pay for some of these players. I don't know about you, Tyler, but I've personally been putting out a good amount of money for this program. We cover them on a weekly basis. I feel like we've been doing our part. I'm not saying Stoops is slacking off by any means. I think Mark Stoops is a very good coach. I think sometimes, he lets the discipline get away. But when you look at that, it's hard to not get frustrated when you see at least 6 of those coaches have been in the playoff that are right above him, and he hasn't. It's just something it's kind of a pill that's a little hard to swallow.
I totally agree here. And look, I think I look into how long has he been the coach now? 12, 13 years?
13th season, I believe.
13th season. So he's been doing this for some time here. I compare him a little bit to Marvin Lewis here with the Cincinnati Bengals. When I look at the Bengals before Marvin Lewis, they were a very wish-washy team. I mean, they were nicknamed the Bungles for the 90s there. Couldn't get to a playoff game to save their life. And then here comes this guy, Marvin Lewis. And he was just good enough to really rebuild this program and give them direction. And, they were able to get to the playoffs with the quarterback, Carson Palmer. And, were able to make runs with Andy Dalton and had some good teams. But they were always one and done in the playoffs. But at least they had that consistency there to really build off of there. But we all knew after several years there, it was time for a new voice that could take the team to the next level after that. And that's when they were able to bring in Zach Taylor. Obviously, some luck there, I think, with getting Joe Burrow and some good pieces there. They ended up getting to the Super Bowl. But they're a different program now with Zach Taylor than they were with Marvin Lewis. And I think this is very much so a similar situation. You bring in Mark Stoops. He brings his program around. There's a lot of good things he's done. But I'm not opposed to hearing if there's potential for a new voice to come into the locker room and really take this program to the next level here. I mean, we're talking about his record in SEC games over the last several here. He's been 2-10. I mean, that's a tough record to swallow here.
2-10 at home.
At home. And that's a tough record to swallow here because, this is the SEC. It's high competition. There's opportunities to go to the playoff every single year if you do well. You don't have to be perfect in the SEC, Cam. I mean, you just have to be good enough to compete here with some of these better teams here. And I think we have the opportunities to do it. When we did it against Ole Miss 2 weeks ago, we did it against Georgia 3 weeks ago. Like, we have the opportunities to do it. We just don't close at the end. And that for me, that resembles a lot of what happened with the Bengals there at the end of Marvin Lewis's career. I think of that Steelers game at the very end there, the tail end there, where they had the game locked up, and then you had two knucklehead personal fouls in the same end of play where they knocked out Antonio Brown, and then you had Pac-Man Jones on the field. That was crazy. It was like, come on. It's those kind of things with this.
Some bad calls in that game, if you remember correctly. Joey Porter was also on the field.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but it's a situation that these guys are in.
And I don't think we need to get down that rabbit hole. But I 100% agree with you about you might have to start thinking about new voices. But the bad thing is that Stoops' buyout right now is $44 million. That's if you can find the money to pay that, I'll support it. I don't want Stoops fired. I do want there to be new voices and new ways of holding people accountable. Because right now it kind of seems like if the players aren't holding each other accountable, they're just not getting held accountable. I don't know if the coaches feel like they don't have that type of power in the new landscape of college football. It's just something that is going to have to be worked with. Stoops doesn't need to be fired, and I don't necessarily agree with that at this moment. Now, let's say somehow they only win 2 games of their last 6, and we finish 5-7. Then I think you're kind of hoping maybe Mark looks for other options. Last year, he kind of looked at the Texas A&M job. Florida's probably going to be hiring a new coach. Maybe they're interested in Mark Stoops. Maybe they're not. Who knows? Stuff like that pops open all the time. But I also don't necessarily know that if they were to move on from Stoops, if they wouldn't just hire somebody that's already within the program. And I'm not sure how much the voice would change if that were to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're not ridiculous to say that. And look, I'm not saying he should be fired today by any means. I'm not a guy that likes to fire a coach midseason anyway. But I think it's one of those things where as his contract starts to run through, I think it's time to really evaluate what we have at head coach and if it's worth looking for new opportunities outside of that. Because we've had 12 to 13 years sample size now. And the results have always been the same. And again, he's done a lot of good stuff, but I think it's also an opportunity to start fresh and go in a different direction here. And hopefully it can be a competitive team within the SEC. That's what my goal would be, is to find someone that can be a little more competitive. And hopefully that's with Mark Stoops. My biggest gripe with him right now is the games that I've been watching here, he's so conservative. And I know that's his forte, and I know some coaches have been conservative in the past, but you got to take some chances too, I feel like. You got to do something on 4th and 1 sometimes. You can't just hold or bail out and say, you know what, we're going to punt it. Or you know what, we're going to kick the field goal. I like our kicker, but goddamn, touchdowns are better than field goals. Field goals are better than punts. So, can we do something here, please?
I believe the reason that Stoops is like that is, first off, he's a defensive-minded coach. You know, he coached down at Miami when Ed Reed and Ray Lewis and those guys were there. That's what he was brought up through. He's brought up, of course, his dad or his brother coached at Oklahoma for a long time. His whole family grew up as coaches, and they were all defensive coaches. So I think that's where he kind of rolls into the conservatism, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And that's what was winning us games back in 2017 through 2019 with those teams, because we really didn't have the talent on the offensive side of the ball like we do now. I think that's why you see him starting to at least loosen the reins a little bit on how conservative he used to be. But it also seems like, as of late, that's kind of backfiring on him. I know Stoops 4 or 5 years ago, the last drive that we had this weekend before the half with 2 minutes left, he's just running the ball. If we pop one off for 10 yards, then he might open up the playbook a little bit. And this week, that backfired. We went, punted, Vandy scores 7. Now we're down 7. It's 14-7 at half. And then Vandy gets the ball back at half. They instantly score. Now we're down 17-7 instead of going at half at 7-7. So I believe that's his thinking. I think a lot of times it works. But right now we're also just all thinking about Well, you went for it on 4th and 7 and threw it up to Berrien against Ole Miss, and that won us the game. It's not all like that. I hear the criticism for it. I really don't think he mismanaged this game. I really think this has got to be put. I think this game has to be put on the players. I know in college we like to just point directly at the coaching staff because, oh, these are kids. These are kids. These guys are professional athletes now. They get paid to show up for work every day, just like you and I do, just like the professionals do. It might not be as much money. Some of them might be making more money than guys in the pros. Travis Hunter's making a ton of money out of Colorado. Shadur Sanders is making a ton of money. Arch Manning's making a lot of money to be the backup at Texas. So you have to hold these guys to a higher standard now. Because some of them are making more than their coaches. Like, why would you, as a 19, 20-year-old, say you're making $200,000 listening to your head coach, listening to your position coach who's making 50? So you gotta reinstall that discipline. That, hey, I am your coach. You're not getting on the field. Simple as that. I feel like playing time is the biggest way to achieve that. You start taking playing time off the field for these guys. Yeah, you're going to lose some to the transfer portal, but at the end of the day, the result you're going to be putting on the field is going to be a lot better.
Yeah, I think you lose some in the transfer portal, but the nice thing about the transfer portal is there's always someone in there as well that can replace them. So, it's a tough gig nowadays in the new era of college sports, but the opportunities are there. I agree. I think there needs to be more discipline on the field. This was one of those games. It was just a slop fest, and it was like, why? You saw me, Cam. I was sitting there. I was like, why? Why'd we do that? What was the thought process behind it? And I know I'm older now, and so I watched the game a little bit differently than when I was playing, but why? How? Some of these plays. So I agree with you a little bit. Look, let's break down the defense here. We talked about the offense, and obviously we just need to be better, clean things up there, finish drives. But on defense here, we held Vandy to 143 yards passing, about 7.9 yards per pass there. Got an interception off of him, and we held him to 145 yards rushing here for 3.9 yards per rush. What were your thoughts? What were your takeaways with the defense?
First off, our linebackers I think they're incredible. I think we have one of the best linebacker tandems in the SEC. And whenever you have something that's part of being the best in the SEC, it's probably the best in the country. Now, granted, a lot of that is thanks to Deion Walker up front by keeping those guys clean. But Derek Jackson keeps making plays on the football. He got an interception this week. He keeps finding ways to make plays. But it just seems like there's one guy who is like not holding their assignment per play. It felt like they were getting a lot of, 7-yard. We talked about it at halftime of this game. It felt like every time we looked up, they were in 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3. Felt like they were getting 7 to 8 yards per play every first down. And it's hard to stop teams when you're giving up stuff like that. And you think, like the way we're talking, we're thinking, a bunch of negatives on this defense. They still only allowed 20 points. Vandy scored 40 last week against Alabama. So, even we're kind of picking this defense apart right now, and they still held them to half the points that Bama did. I'm not going to put this on the defense. I know Brad White was very frustrated post-game with the defense. He felt there were some missed assignments. We got to work on our open field tackling. I feel like that's become a little bit of an issue as of late. It's harder to tackle these SEC guys than it is when you got to face, Ohio. No disrespect again. I know Ohio keeps catching a lot of strays out here, but you're not tackling those guys. Yeah. You're not playing anybody in the MAC. This is SEC football. They're going to be able to, break more tackles. I think this defense is fine. This offense has got to find ways to help them out, play complementary football. When you lose in all three phases of the game, when the offense shoots themselves in the foot, the special teams can't get a snap back to the holder, and then the holder can't get the snap down. You lose 2 of the 3 phases of the game, and no matter how well your defense plays, it's really tough to win a football game.
Listen, I'm going to take a slightly different take here, Cam. I'm not discrediting what you've said whatsoever. I respect that. But I think the defense needs to be better here against Vanderbilt. And the reason for it is, they only scored 20 points. Alabama let up 40. I can respect that score. They did very much between the two. They very much kept us in the game versus our offense. However, you and I were talking about it during the game. It wasn't the fact that they scored 20 points. It wasn't the fact that in the first half we only allowed 2 touchdowns. In the second half we only allowed 2 field goals. It was the fact that even on those scoring drives, they just held the ball forever. I mean, they held the ball for 34 and a half minutes here to our 25 and a half. They kept our offense off the field. Granted, partially our offense's fault. But how many times did we talk about it? We were on the field. We had them in a what should have been a third and long situation, and then like you said, we either gave up a penalty or we gave them a get out of jail free card. They kept the drive going. They would just keep going down the field, even if they had to end up punting it. It felt like they held the ball for 5 or 6 minutes. And it felt like one of those games. It was like they weren't scoring, but they were managing the clock. And that is, in my eyes, is just as bad as letting up a lot of points. If you can score 20 points, but you keep the ball for almost 35 minutes, I think that's just as bad.
I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, time of possession, I mean, it can vary based on what your offense does. When your offense is sitting there allowing penalty after penalty after penalty, the clock stops moving in those situations. So a lot of that could be added on to stuff like that. And they did. There was, 3 or 4 different instances where we had them in, third and longs where it should be, okay, time for us to get off the field. We're done. Offense is getting the ball back. And for the love of God, can we talk about getting Berrien back there for punt return? That is what he's the best at. That is his forte. It's just open field, bob and weave, try and make guys miss. But we keep insisting on having Jamori back there. And they asked Mark Stoops this on Monday at his press conference, and they said Berrien just got too much on the plate. He's always gassed. I don't know if I'm looking at something different. Berrien only had 4 touches. So I don't know if me and Mark are just seeing the game that much different, but I want my best playmaker to have the ball anytime he can. Not just, oh, hey, it's a fourth quarter. Now let me go trot him out there. No. Whenever, especially, you know how fickle college kickers are. There could be a line drive right at you. The punt team hasn't gotten down there. Next thing you know, even Berrien just sprinting straight up's got 15 yards. I think that's part of the game we're losing. We're losing the field position battle right now. Part is on our punters, and part is on our punt return. I think that's a big part of the game as well, because it seems like our offense is always starting, at the 30 or back. And it's just... It's mind-boggling to me to not have one of your best playmakers in a position to succeed.
Yeah, God forbid we put our 20-year-old speedster back there, right? Like, I can get it in the NFL when you put your 29-year-old defensive back. Like, I'm thinking Patrick Peterson. As he got older, they stopped putting him on punt returns. They're like, okay, we want to reserve you just for defensive back. I get that. He's a little bit older. The NFL nutrition's a little bit differently. You're playing against grown men out there. You're 20 years old. God bless it. Just put the guy back there. Let him get the ball. Let him get his touches. And like you said, I mean, you never know where that kick's going to go in college football. Man, imagine the punting team. So here's the difference, Cam, and I'll break it down for our users. When you kick the ball, you're a punter. You kick the ball, you punt it. Let's say you had a nice kick, 60 yards. No matter where you're out in the field, that flips the field on the team, correct?
Yep.
You give that to Berrien Brown, he's able to make up 10, 15 yards of that. It doesn't matter if it's a 60-yard kick or a 40-yard kick. He just unflipped your flip. That's probably the worst nightmare for a punter, would you say?
It's huge, and especially a lot of times that very first guy down there on the punt team is usually the chubby little long snapper because he's not allowed to get touched off the line. The gunner is normally second following, but they're getting blocked on the way down there. So normally it's the chunky little long snapper that maybe is like 5'10", 230. He just finished polishing off a 30 rack last night. That's normally the first guy going down there. If all I'm saying is if I got a chance to have Berrien Brown versus a 5'10", 215, 230-pound long snapper in the open field, sign me up for that all day long. Don't get me wrong, Berrien did end up later in the game getting tackled by the kicker. So maybe there is something to what Mark is doing here. But it seems like we're not giving ourselves opportunities in which ways we should. Because right now, Berrien is not. It's not like he's so valuable in our offense that you can't take him away from that, or like you're scared of him getting hurt in that aspect. At the beginning of the season, I understand it because we expected him to be so much of a bigger part of this offense. But Dane Key is the number one receiver on this team, and it's not close. Right now, we're trying to get the ball to Dane, then we're handing it off to Demi. We're letting Gavin run. We're letting Brock run. What would you say, Berrien's fifth option on this offense right now?
Let's say let's not pretend like he's the main focal point here. We run the ball. Our identities run the rock, throw it out to Dane, and sprinkle it around here and there afterwards. Like that's our game plan.
Yeah, and I completely agree. So that would be the only conversation I could hear Mark having about that as to why he's not back there, and it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. But trying to get back on topic, we haven't. Even in that Ole Miss game, there were still parts of the game where we weren't putting all three phases of the game together. Most of the time, special teams has not been the problem all season. Granted, we might have jinxed it on this podcast last week because we were talking about how many in a row Alex has made. Granted, that streak is still alive because he didn't touch either of those footballs. But that jinx might have came directly from you, Tom. I'm not going to point any fingers. So, Alex, if you're mad at anybody, the guy in the blue today, he's the one.
You know what, Alex? I was trying to get your autograph, and you walked right by me. So, yeah, I'll take responsibility on that. I'll put my hand up on that.
We need to play complimentary football for 4 quarters. Right now, we can't. And I don't know if that's a coaching thing, that's a lack of discipline or a lack of confidence. But it seems like whatever you expect this team to do, they do the exact opposite. We expected them to come in, take care of business against South Carolina. We got destroyed. We expected Georgia to come in here and blow the doors off. We held them to 1 point. We take care of Ohio. We took care of that game like it was expected. Then we go to Ole Miss. Everybody's thinking we're losing. We come out of that game. We looked really good, have one of the best road wins in the Stoops era. Come back home. We have 2 weeks to prepare for Vandy. We're a double-digit favorite. Everybody's expecting you to win. It's the first blackout since 2014. The place is crowded. It's packed. What did we sit down at that game for? Maybe like 45 seconds combined? Everybody was on their feet the entire game. I've never seen Kroger Field like that. When I was at the Ohio game, I felt bad for standing up when Max had a pick six. I kind of felt bad. But no, in this game, everybody was on their feet. That place was so loud. And it's just every time it seems like we take 2 steps forward, 2 steps right back. And who knows, maybe we go down into Gainesville and we take care of these Florida Gators, not the Georgia Gators, the Florida Gators. We take care of them. I got Georgia on my mind. But they also are coming off of their best game all season. They just barely lost to Tennessee 23-17, and it took them into overtime. So I'm not even all that convinced about that game. Right now, I'm spiraling. I need this team to get me back on the upswing with a nice win on Saturday.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point there with Max, too. I mean, he's obviously been out for some time, so hopefully we can get him back here soon and shore up our defense. But why don't we go ahead and transition to that next game, Cam? You talked about us playing Florida here. As of right now, it's a 1.5 point difference in the game in favor of Florida, which is insane to think about. But they do have it right now. The matchup predictor is saying that there's about a 59.5% chance the Gators are going to win this. I don't blame them. It's in the swamp. It's going to be muggy. It's going to be nasty. It's going to be sweaty. I don't think that the energy, hopefully the energy is back from Kentucky, but based on what I saw walking off the field after that, didn't seem like the energy was fully there yet. So hopefully that's back here coming into the swamp next week. Cam, what do you got going on for next week's game?
The one thing I can say about Stoops' teams is it seems like whenever they lay an egg like that, like we did against South Carolina, whenever we played horrible, the very next week we come out and play very well. So I wouldn't be surprised if we go into Gainesville, if we go into the swamp, and we win it. I'm not going to say we win it convincingly, just because we don't have the offense to win the game convincingly. But you also got to remember this team just barely lost to Tennessee. Granted, Graham Mertz did just tear his ACL, their starting quarterback, so he is out for the season. But their backup, DJ Lagway, 5-star. He's got all the tools to play. He's been playing a lot this season anyways. He finished the game last week. Granted, I think the very first play he came in, he did throw a pick. So hopefully, with our defensive line, our linebackers, Max is not going to be back for this game, unfortunately. But hopefully, JQ, Jansen, DJ Waller, hopefully those guys are up for the task because Florida's always got weapons to throw to. They might not be able to get them the ball, but this team's going to have a lot of energy. They're going to be ready to play in front of their home fans. And hopefully they're ready to play for their coach because their coach's job is still on the line. And he's got a coach like he's got nothing to lose because he honestly really doesn't have anything to lose.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those games, Cam, where it's just a little bit. I think it's going to be one of those close games. Like you said, we usually come back after a loss and play pretty well. Without Max being out there still, I think that's a big hole in our defense. I still see it being a close game, and right now I just don't have enough faith in our team to pull it off. And I hope that I'm wrong. I know I said earlier in an earlier podcast I had us beating Florida. I had a little more optimism coming in. But I'm not gonna lie, man. It's been tough to watch this year. We've been so wish-washy. I think if we don't get all three phases of this game, I think it's a tough one to win down in the swamp here. I'm going to call it close here, but I'm going to call it in favor of Florida here. 2024 is my prediction.
Well, I do have some good news. Chip Trayanum might finally play this week. They said he was close to playing last week. We haven't seen him. This was supposed to be our bell cow running back. So maybe with him and Demi kind of splitting the carries, maybe that changes our offense where we get back to more of that ground and pound and, take shots. More of an offense like that where we get into second manageables, third manageables, where we can keep that time of possession down to in our favor, like we did in that Ole Miss game and like we did in the Georgia game. Getting him back, if he does play, it's still not a certainty, but it's trending good. I don't know how much he will play if he is active. That should be a shot in the arm. You're getting a guy coming from Ohio State. Anytime you get an Ohio State player, it's going to help out. Having him back should be huge. Based on how bad we shot ourselves in the foot last week, I want to say the Gators are going to win this game. But Kentucky always finds a way to bounce back in games like that. Before this game, we were best in the SEC at not getting penalized. So was this game just an outlier? Hopefully it was. Hopefully we get back to playing football that we were the prior 3 weeks. I got us winning this game 24-17. I think the offense plays well. I think this will be one of their better games that you've seen in the SEC. They find ways to get – I think Dane has a big bounce-back game this week. I think he's got motivation to come back after having that personal foul. And it wasn't chippiness like you said earlier. He literally just slapped a guy in the back of the head. That ain't chippiness. That's just idiocracy. But I think he'll come back better than ever. He's been great this year. Momentary lapse against Vanderbilt. I think this team finds a way to go to Gainesville, gets it done, and hopefully we're talking about this in a much better light next week because it feels like every week you and I are either riding high and we're at the top of the mountain or we just fell off the edge of the cliff. It feels like there has been no in-between with this team. Hopefully we can find a way to kind of steady the boat and just take her on in, take her home.
Yeah, I think we do better when we downplay them a little bit. So I'm gonna go the negative route here, and hopefully that pays off. And if that somehow gets us a win, I'm gonna continue to do it. But hopefully we get the win, Cam. I hope that your optimism works. But right now I'm just not. I just can't be that optimistic. So why don't you wrap us up for it? Why don't you wrap us up?
Yeah. In quick recruiting news this week, Kentucky has flipped 2 individual 3-star recruits. One was committed to West Virginia. He committed earlier today. And then one was committed to Missouri. We got him the day prior. And keep on the lookout. Michael Skinner, he was a tight end from South Carolina. He was originally committed to Cincinnati. He decommitted about a month and a half ago. He was in attendance for the UK-South Carolina game. he makes his commitment decision on Tuesday. So keep an eye out on that. I would expect him to lean Kentucky's way. I don't have any inside information, so if he doesn't, don't come at me. But all things are looking good for Michael Skinner. Hopefully, he's a cat. Hopefully, by this time next week, we're talking about pulling in another 4-star recruit and a win at Florida. And next thing you know, we're back in the good graces, and we're all excited again for that Auburn game.
Oh, yeah. Isaac, if you're listening to this, by the way, it was nice meeting you. And go Cats, huh?
Isaac, we gave you a recruiting pitch, buddy. Come on home. You don't want to leave the great bluegrass. But I'll go ahead and wrap up the podcast there. Recruiting is going great. Cats are on a little bit of a down spell. Hopefully, big game. It's going to be obviously at Florida, 7:45 night game. Cats go into Gainesville, take care of business. We'll get a nice 4-star recruit on Tuesday. And by the time we re-record this, I'll be jumping for joy. With all that being said, go Big Blue.
Go Cats.